Hello, anyone, everyone, and all the ones in between. Welcome to another one of these. We do these all the time. We're getting into the rhythm of it now. It's a live stream with Into Games. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching live, hello to you in the chat window. I don't know which side of the screen I should wave at, but I wave to both sides of you. And if you're not joining us live and you're watching this as a recording, hello to you in the future. I hope the cars can fly now and that the M25 doesn't have traffic. Welcome. I'm Jonas. I'm the community manager and the events lead for Into Games. And fancy that, this is one of the events that I organize, and thank you for joining me and for sort of for giving these events a little bit of love and attention. I hope it's valuable. I hope it gives you something, some new information, or just some nice background listening for you this Tuesday afternoon. Today we are doing a Q&A session, so we're going to be welcoming someone on stage. Who are you talking about, Jonas? You're being so aloof. It's not like it's in the title of the video and all the promo art. I know. We're going to be doing a little Q&A session where we'll just get to chat with someone. We'll ask a couple of questions. We'll learn a little bit about their role in the industry and what they do and some of their experiences. And that's an opportunity as well for you in chat to just ask questions. That's all this is. It's just a chance for you to get your questions answered. If you don't know something in the next hour, let's solve that for you. Let's teach you the thing that you might want to learn or know. But enough rambling, Jonas, about the concept of a Q&A, and why don't we just get on with it? So I'm going to invite on stage my guest for today. It is Anya, who is going to appear next to me. There we go. Hello, Anya. How's it going?
Hello, it's going very well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this. It's been a little while since I've done any kind of Q&A stuff, so I'm excited.
Nice. Before we get started, I want to just comment on the very good green branding you've got going on. The Monstera, the light at the end of the headphones, the hair color. It's a very cohesive, colorful brand.
It's all I go for. It's just the color green for everything, and I'm happy.
Nice. Soon you will just be a walking green screen.
Yeah.
Which is a technical challenge in and of itself, really. Well, first of all, Anya, I thought let's ask the first big question. I hope it's not too overwhelming, everyone, but I think if we don't ask this question, then I don't know how we're going to move on. Anya, who are you? In a grand sense, but also in a sense of what do you do in terms of your work, your career? What are you doing? What are you doing on Into Games' YouTube channel, talking to Jonas? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, indeed. So, hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Anya. I have in the past been pretty active online doing a lot of environment art stuff. So that is what I do. I am a stylized environment artist. So I've worked on a range of games, from things like Total War right at the beginning of my career, various indie games. I worked for Rare for a while on Everwild, and all sorts. There is a content. What's the word? Like when Unreal Engine's starter content. There's a game that I worked on called Crop Out, which is a super cute little game, so you can learn a little bit about Unreal Engine 5 environment art stuff. And the reason I'm here talking is because I am doing an Into Games sprint where we're going to talk a little bit about my specialism, stylized environment art. So me as an artist, I am kind of a generalist, I would say. I do a lot of 3D stuff in the kind of stylized bracket of environment art, which is very broad, very open. You can call a lot of games stylized. And I also do concept art. I do a little bit of illustration. So I've worked for a few indie studios doing like promo art for their games, things like that, in the more illustrative side of things. And I've also done lots of really messy concept art that will never see the light of day, because it's very functional and it just has to serve a purpose to get through to the actual production environment art stage. So that's the kind of stuff that I do, and that's what I'm going to be teaching in this sprint. And if you have any questions about any of this stuff today, that's what I am here for.
Nice. Thank you so much for going so broad and yet so deep into all of that. And I'm sure we can dig into some different like projects and questions later on. Firstly, I thought it'd be really good just to touch on that little bit of context there. So, Anya, you're joining us because you are in fact running a sprint course. When is it? It's not. It's soon, isn't it? It's next
Yeah,
month, if I remember
starts on the
correctly.
2nd of September.
Starts on the 2nd of September. Excellent stuff. And so if you haven't heard of these intergame sprint courses before, the way that these work is we kind of recognize that there's a lot of power and potential from not just learning about like a topic or a subject, but actually learning from an individual who has done it, is doing it, continues to do it in the industry. And so by having these short form courses that only last 3 weeks, it presents like a really good opportunity to just sit down with a person who is kind of like able to make that time, a couple of evenings a week for just under a month, and sit down with people and actually kind of teach them a skill or sort of a subject, and actually create a bit of work alongside of them. So sort of showing people how they go from zero to something, with sort of care to attention and working practices and tools and feedback throughout the entire thing. So we do this in a few different ways. We've got audio courses, game design courses, QA courses, and of course with you, Anya, we've got like sort of an art environmental design, environmental art course.
Environment art. Yeah, environment
Environmental art
art.
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, all of those words just in a different order,
Stuff.
but you get the
Yes.
you get the idea. Very much again on that brand of green. Environment, maybe a plant or two somewhere in
All
there.
the foliage, yeah.
Exactly, foliage. Say it like Lisa Simpson, foliage. And yeah, so if you haven't heard of those sprint courses before, then just so you can go check them out quite quickly. The link's quite simple. I put it on the screen for you, so you can use your eyeballs. But it is you can visit the website Into Games, all one word, intogames.courses. If you go to intogames.courses, you'll be able to see all the different sprint courses we do, including Anya's course. So please do check that out. And but if you're not sure, then by all means we can ask some questions today if you want to ask a little bit about what that course could be, should be, will be for you. And yeah, more than happy to have conversations about that. But anyways, I am going to, so firstly, just audiences, hello, thank you for being so chatty and so friendly. What would be really wonderful is if you've got questions now, basically start putting them in the YouTube chat. Just make sure they all end in a question mark. That's generally how questions work in our language form, but it's just a little good visual key for me as well to know what's a question and what's just a lovely statement. So go ahead and line up your questions, but I'll sort of start with a question for you, Anya, which is, could you tell me just a little bit about your journey into kind of where you've got now, and can you just give me some really good like checkpoints where did you go from like maybe a student to a worker? Where did you go from a hobbyist to a professional? Were there any sort of breaking points where a single bit of work or a single event really kind of changed the landscape of your career? Yeah, just give us the whole timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started studying as a artist in games in 2013, I would say. So like 10 years ago now. I had never touched a 3D software before. Um, I didn't. I think I started with 3ds Max, and the first time I used 3ds Max was my first day at university. It was the worst experience of my life. I hated it. I remember absolutely rage quitting on that first session at university. But yes, I came in with zero experience from like an environment artist or 3D artist standpoint. Uh, on the art side of stuff, however, I had done A-level art, so I was, doing kind of the airy-fairy fine art side of art that you tend to do at school, and that was my experience of doing art. So I joined university in 2013. I went to De Montfort University, and that is kind of like a broad game art course. So the first thing that often happens when you start studying as an artist is for games, that is you kind of start quite broad. Do I want to be a character artist? Do I want to be an environment artist? Stylized, realistic, you could do anything. There's so much choice. And so my first 3 years when I was studying at university, or I'd say more so my first 2 years, was I was learning what I wanted to do, like what I liked. And so the big thing that I would say with that is I always tell people, if you find something you enjoy, keep gravitating towards that and push towards that, because at the end of the day, you want to do stuff you enjoy for your job. Even if you think you're really good at characters, if you prefer doing environments, it's probably best to focus on the environment stuff. So I worked through university. By the end, I was like, right, stylized environment. So I had a lot of projects that I did at university. Obviously, you're studying full time, so you're producing a lot of work. But the thing that got me into the industry as my first job was I worked on a final major project, which was making like a series of little dioramas based on a book series that I really love by an author called Robin Hobb. I made 3 dioramas, quite small and like concentrated, and I was sharing this work with somebody in the industry who had actually studied at the university that I was at. And I was asking him for a lot of feedback all the time, constantly acting on that feedback, showing that I could act on feedback. And that ended up with me being referred for a traineeship at Creative Assembly. So that's how I got my first job. A lot of speaking with industry professionals, showing that I can take feedback and that I listen. That was the biggest thing that catapulted me into the industry in the first place. So I graduated with a job. Since then, I've basically just been working as an environment artist. There have been moments where I would say that I've had like level ups in my career. And I always trace those back to times where I kind of like come back to myself, focus on what I enjoy as an artist, and then act on that in my personal work. So the next thing that I would say always elevates my career is doing personal projects that I love. I just do dioramas. Like all of my personal projects are dioramas, like small, concentrated environments. And it's what we're going to do in the sprint course that I'm doing as well. Diorama focused, they're quick, they're small, they show off your skills. So yeah, just always focusing on what I enjoy, sharing it with industry professionals. That's usually what like helps to elevate my career overall.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks for sharing all that, and well done. Sounds like you did a great job back then to sort of go straight from uni to job to what you do
Yeah.
now.
I mean, I will also mention like this we're in like a weird time, right, in the games industry right now. Like I will say I worked hard and I was sharing my work with a lot of people all the time. I was posting a lot online on like Polycount and those lovely forums. But yeah, I think I in some ways got quite lucky. I think it is hard now, but I think the principles do still apply today as well.
Nice. Well, thanks for going through all that with us. I'm just going to do a quick rearrange of us on the screen so that I can do
Look
a
at
little
that.
trick. It's all right. So it just means I can do a little thing later. It'll make all the difference. No, it won't. Let's go for some questions because the chat have given us some wonderful questions to go through, and I will go from the top as far as I can tell. So first of all, thank you for the questions, by the way. Feel free to keep them coming. Cannot promise that we have time for all of them, but can promise that we'll do our darndest. And just as a quick shout out as well, if you feel like you don't get your question answered here, or you wish you could continue these kinds of conversations outside of the context of this YouTube, check out somewhere in the description of this video the link to the Intergames Discord community. Join the community. Lots of wonderful people in there, including other industry professionals who are all constantly answering questions and giving each other advice and things like that. So jump in. Anyways, questions from our audience. So first of all, I'm going to go for this question from Mocha Cat. So because you just touched on it there, but maybe let's talk about it sort of as a focus subject. Is it easy to start in the industry as an environment artist? And obviously we can say yes or no to that, but I'm sure there's a conversation to be had.
Yes, there's a big conversation to be had. So I guess like with anything, is it easy? No, I don't think anything is easy. It depends on your definition of easy. The industry in general is very hard to break into, and always has been, always will be. Like I said, we're in a kind of weird stage of the industry right now. There's a lot of layoffs. It goes without saying that that is probably terrifying if you're trying to break into the industry. I will say that I think if you are a good environment artist, you will get hired. It is a matter of time. It is a matter of putting yourself out there, which is really difficult and scary, and speaking to the right people. How do you find them? That's really hard. I think the fact that you guys are here says a lot about the fact that you want to learn more and you want to find those connections. So in that sense, you're already making it easier for yourself to become an environment artist because you're putting in that extra legwork that a lot of people don't put in. So that's the kind of like networking side, getting your work out there. Like I say, sharing your work. And again, things like Twitter, that's where I used to share my work all the time. It's like Twitter's a bit of a funny one at the moment. So it's kind of a slightly destabilized stage of the industry right now and getting your work out there. But it's still very possible. Going on to the technical skills side of things, is it easy to become or get into the industry as an environment artist? Well, art isn't easy. So no, it's not, but there's lots of resources out there to improve your work. So I think the onus has to be on you to try and improve your art, get your art out there, and get lots of feedback constantly on your work to improve it. That's the main thing you can do. If we talk about becoming an artist in the industry as like a larger topic, becoming an environment artist versus becoming, say, a character artist, I would say is probably slightly easier because there is going to be more environment art jobs. Environments are massive in a lot of games, so a lot of artists are required to build them. So from that standpoint, there's probably more environment artist jobs. However, as a character artist as well, there are also a lot of character art jobs because characters are the main thing in a game at the end of the day. Like there's a lot of games are story focused and so on. So there's kind of like different ways that you can come up and this is an argument I've seen a lot of people having. It's like, is it easier to be a character artist in games or is it easier to be an environment artist in games? And it's a bit of a tough one to answer definitively. But yeah, to answer it concisely, maybe no, it's not easy to become an environment artist in games, but is anything worth doing easy? Maybe not.
Nice. Thank you very much for the answer there, and thank you for the question, Mogger Cat. I think yeah, there's definitely some more questions as well as we go down, so we'll come back to you as well in a bit.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I'm doing is I'm just scanning questions because there's going to be some commonality amongst some of them, or there might be a good through line. But no, I think this is just as good a question to move on to as any. Kobocha, I'm probably saying some of these names so terribly wrong, and I apologize. But for now, Kobocha says, what skills would a 2D generalist need to develop to transition into an environment art role?
That's a good question. Bearing in mind, I started as a 3D artist, I would say more so. I like foundationally, I am a 3D environment artist, and then the concept stuff is just kind of an additional thing. So I might have a different opinion to a lot of people on this. But if you are a 2D artist or a 2D generalist, and I'm saying this from my 2D artist side now, if I want to make nice, successful 2D art for me personally, I do a lot of 3D blocking out for personal art and for illustrations that I do. Every single concept art piece that I produce and that is on my portfolio, bar like a couple, is started with a 3D base. So I'd say a good place to start is just experiment with blocking out or creating blockouts for your 2D art. Not only will this potentially elevate your 2D art, like perspective-wise, color-wise, and so on, but then you're learning a 3D software. So something like Blender, for instance, is very easy to block out in Blender, export it as an FBX or an OBJ, And I would also suggest experimenting with Unreal Engine to place your blockouts in. So if you just make a really basic scene in Unreal Engine, put your meshes in, you have a skylight, a directional light, which is your sun effectively. And you can just take some screenshots, like move the lighting around and experiment with that. You're already making those initial steps to making a game or a piece of game art. Getting stuff in Unreal Engine is that first step. It's the first step that I always make if I'm concepting something or if I'm just beginning to start like a diorama or a 3D project. All of my 3D work that I do is presented in Unreal Engine. So, Unreal Engine is a great place to start with just learning basic stuff, making materials. And from there, I think the natural course will be that if you enjoy experimenting with making stuff in Blender and putting stuff inside Unreal Engine 5, you might find yourself interested in making textures for that stuff in Photoshop, for instance. If you're doing 2D generalist stuff anyway, you're probably using Photoshop. So it's very doable, very usable. The skills are very transferable. And just starting to dabble in making stuff in 3D for yourself, potentially to help make your 2D stuff better, but also just it's fun. And you'll find, I think, a natural course of, okay, I've made this plant. How do I make it blow in the wind? You can search that easily on YouTube, how to make a material to make a plant move in the wind. And it will just come each thing. How do I do this? Oh, that's how I do it. How do I do the next thing? And that's how I started out. That's how I started learning to use UDK, which is Unreal Engine 3, effectively, was just being interested in how I do something, using internet resources to find the answer, and then you just keep leveling up and leveling up.
Nice. Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. And just noticing as well, some people are just asking some questions about the course in particular. By all means, I've just jumped into the FAQ and I've just answered your question, Maria, from the FAQ on the website. But if you still have questions, please do ask them and I will sneakily give you an answer in chat. That way we can let Anya keep on with the art focus questions. Which, speaking of, I'm gonna go to the next question. Darksart, you've got a question about the Sprint project. What I'll do is, again, I'll give you a comment that answers that question for you. But Mockercat, you have asked, can environment artists also work as props artists? Can environment artists also work as props artists? I don't have enough context to expand on that question, but I trust you know exactly what your answer is.
Yeah, so there's it's a good question actually, because it kind of highlights the difference between what some people would see as a prop artist and what some people would see as an environment artist. So I would say for me, like I personally do not call myself a props artist. I am very much an environment artist. However, you'll see a lot of job listings that seek an environment artist, and you effectively just end up making props. The difference being, if we say it is a difference, is that generally an environment artist is going to be doing a lot more kind of like generalisty stuff. So you might be placing props in an environment, making props, making things like mountains, trees, modular kits. You might even end up doing a bit of lighting, and it's kind of a more broad job. Whereas a props artist, you basically will get hired to make a list of props, often in more of a AAA context. If you're kind of a smaller cog in a larger machine, so you have like one job and that's what you do. You might occasionally dip into other things. So to answer the question, can an environment artist also work as a props artist? Yes, absolutely. I think if you're going to get hired at all as an environment or prop artist, your portfolio needs to show a good example of props being made. When I started as an environment artist at Creative Assembly, I was an environment artist and I was making props for the Total War Warhammer 2 campaign map. just like top down, making a lot of little things like trees, decals for the terrain, cliffs, things like that. So I was effectively a prop artist, but I was also doing little things like adding lights and so on. Um, as time's gone on, I have done a mixture of things, being like really seriously just doing props for a game. I get given a list and I make it, but I've also done like much more generalist stuff, like blocking out environments and kind of more vague stuff. But when I started, my portfolio had very kind of little, I would say, good examples of prop art. It was environment art in that I was making these general dioramas that had some props in. But if you took one of those props and put it in a portfolio piece alone, it wasn't very good. It was more like about the big picture stuff. So I would say it's good to just show examples of good props in your portfolio. And then you will be working as an environment and or prop artist. They blur into both, but you do just want to go show good examples of props in your portfolio generally.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much. And next on the question list, I quite like this one because I play a lot of AAA games. Kobocha asks, how common is stylized art in AAA? Yeah, I think the question speaks for itself, really.
Yeah, I mean, so I think if you'd asked that question to me sort of when I first started out, I'd probably say it wasn't super prevalent. Obviously, you get games like World of Warcraft, super popular game. Yeah, there's always, I think, going to be stylized AAA games, and there were when I started in the industry. But I definitely felt like in being a stylized artist, I was giving myself less of a shot at getting a job. Nowadays, I think it's much more common. Loads of games are stylized, and I'm not talking from the standpoint of like World of Warcraft level of stylization either, like hand painted. I'm talking about a whole spectrum. If you take like realistic games and stylized games where it's literally, I don't know, not even World of Warcraft level, like just super flat colors, almost abstract. There's a whole range between that of stylized games. Things like The Witcher 3, for instance, has a kind of realistic vibe, but it's actually very stylized. The colors are super stylized. There is like a lot of artistic license being taken. So even something like The Witcher, I would go so far as to say it has a stylized level. So I think that these things, AAA games are, yeah, commonly stylized, and as much more so nowadays. So yeah, if you're thinking of being a stylized environment artist and you're wondering if there are projects for you in AAA, yeah, absolutely. And in addition to that, there's all the indie games out there as well. So yeah.
Nice. I suppose a quick little question from my end on that sort of subject is, do we have lots of like AAA games that like God of War, Last of Us, Spider-Man, Ghost of Sekiro, like the big kind of, I don't know, PlayStation single player narrative AAA games.
Mhm.
Is the final result always ends up having a certain element of realism to them? But would you say that the art that went into those games, like the process of kind of creating art for those games, is still very much stylized? Like, and do we see it in the end product at all? Like if something had a very stylized concept and environment, we might not always see it in the end product because it always comes out super realistic or cinematic,
Yeah.
with film grain and all these things.
Yeah, it's a funny one. Like I think certainly with AAA, like studios with huge budgets, they're quite good at they get amazing art, like concept artists on board to do absolutely incredible concept stuff. And I have definitely seen it before where uh, you get these amazing kind of really quirky concepts, and then the actual final game that is sometimes lost just because maybe it was complicated to implement, or I think when you have a lot of people working on one thing, sometimes the vision can get lost a little bit. Um, but for games that do even have like the final product has that stylized vibe, um, there's still, I think, a lot of like realistic groundwork going into that. For instance, very realistic materials like metals, wood, whatever. If you like got the textures from these games and looked at them in isolation, they probably would look incredibly realistic, and they are realistic. But often it might be a certain level of post processing, VFX afterwards that is actually reintroducing that stylized feel. There might be like outline shaders, wacky VFX, post process over the top to add like different like tone mapping and things like that. So it's not just necessarily that the props themselves are stylized. It might be that the props themselves are very realistic, but like additions are made after the fact to add that stylized feel. So there's kind of like a variety of different ways that things are worked. You could also get games where the props proportioning, like the physical silhouette of stuff, is super realistic, but then the textures applied are really stylized and painterly. Or you could get it like the other way around, where like silhouettes are kind of like simplified and cartoony almost. I hate the word cartoony, but I just said it. But then the textures applied are actually super realistic. So there's like lots of different ways that things could be worked to be realistic or stylized or a blend of the two.
Nice. No, thanks for expanding on that, because yeah, my art vocabulary is so small and simple, and it's just nice to expand on these things in case anyone's sort of exploring these concepts for the first time, maybe. Thomas Wanless is the next person up in my question list and asks, or sort of starts with the statement: I don't often see environment artists specialize in both 3D production and concept art. The question then is, which side did you often get hired for in your past jobs?
Good question. So yeah, I started out as a 3D artist, just 3D. I always had an interest in painting. This is why I say to people, like, do what you enjoy. So I was working as a 3D artist at Creative Assembly. Um, and occasionally I would find an excuse to like take a screenshot of the environment and do like a little overpaint, like maybe a lighting overpaint or suggestions for what I thought would be cool to add. And I would try and like show it to important people to just get my foot in there with like, hey, I also like doing 2D stuff. But my first like 2 or 3 jobs, so I had Creative Assembly. I worked freelance for Molasses Flood on one of their games. That was 3D stuff as well. And then I worked for Rare after that, I think. And again, that was 3D environment artist. So most of my work starting out was 3D because that's what my portfolio had in it. But when I was at Rare, I was doing a lot of personal painting stuff, and I managed to transition into a concept art position for like my final 6 months there before my contract ended and I left. So I was like finding a way to pivot within my job. After that, and I left Rare, I went freelance full time. And then it was like a huge mix. So I was doing kind of 50-50, I would say, 3D stuff, also some concept art stuff, some illustration. And that was easier because I was freelancing. So I could just take a job for like 2 weeks or a month or whatever. So it was easier for me to find these small, isolated illustration jobs or concept art jobs or making some props just for like a couple of months for a client. So that's when I managed to really broaden my skill set a lot more because I was doing it for work as well as personal stuff when I was doing personal things. Nowadays, like if we look at me doing work now in the current climate of the games industry, I have one long-term client. I do environment art 3D stuff for them, but I've also done some illustration stuff for them. And again, if I can get chance, I'll like take a little screenshot of the game, do some overpainting for suggestions. So I'm kind of like exercising both of those skills. Even though I am an environment artist, I'm still using my other skills because I enjoy it and I have them. So why not do it? And I do get contacted for both prop stuff and 2D stuff. But definitely, I would say more so now, more so environment. But it kind of changes with the climate. So it's hard to answer that in a definitive way going forward.
I think that's one of the common sort of, I don't know, through lines of almost every answer to everything in the games industry is like there isn't just one answer that fits
No.
everyone, that matches every scenario. There is always going to be a certain level of it's different for every project, it's different for every organization, it's different for every person, it's different year to year as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's strange seeing how the climate has changed. Like, now I've been kind of in the industry or aware of the industry for like 10 years. I can look back and see how things have changed, and there's different like trends in the industry. Can start to see those patterns.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, maybe something that doesn't have a pattern. Maybe that's something that has been consistent this entire time. A question about your process. Mivi asks, how do you go about finding inspiration for your work? What is your process?
Yeah, well, okay. So I definitely would say like where you find inspiration for your work, it is probably the big thing that will set you apart from other artists and make your work stand out from other people. So it's a very important question. Um, and I think it's kind of a tough one because everybody can go on to Pinterest and look at pictures and find cool pictures of things. Maybe not so much nowadays with all the AI junk that's on there, but that's just my opinion. But honestly, and I think if you ask any artist this, you'll get the same answer, is like going out in the real world and just finding stuff that you like. So I've done a lot of personal projects in the past, and the first big personal project that I did, which was a diorama, funnily enough, it was inspired by a really tiny street corner in the city of Leicester. I wouldn't say Leicester's a particularly picturesque place, and this corner that I found certainly wasn't. But there was something about there was like this little step, and there was a little tree and a fence around it, and then this kind of shuttered building at the back. And I loved it. Like, I was obsessed with it, and I took it and I started blocking out this little in Unreal Engine and using probably 3ds Max at the time, blocking out this little corner and then overpainting it. So this is like my process, which I'll go into a bit more in the course if anybody's interested. But blocking out just like this really basic little scene and then overpainting it with ideas. And I was pulling a little bit more from Pinterest at this point, and like personal photographs that I'd taken going out for walks. But I took this street corner in Leicester and I turned it into a Moroccan market. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to take your reference and like run with it and make it into a weird grotty corner in Leicester. You can take your reference and completely change it into something else. You just need to find your inspiration for that. So I was really into Moroccan, like just the look of Moroccan stuff at the time. So I was Googling things. I was like looking at videos of people just like walking through Morocco, Pinterest, finding stuff on Pinterest. I've never been, well, I have now, but at the time had never been to Morocco. So I didn't have any photos myself that I had taken. But yeah, I wasn't relying on what I'd seen from other people's environment art, because I think that can really muddy yourself. You're comparing yourself to other people. It's gonna kind of take you off like your personal idea of what you want to do. So I like kind of kept to myself, focused on my own idea of what I wanted to do, did a bunch of scribbly stuff, and yeah, created this really simple concept that I could make. So, but yeah, nowadays I would absolutely say go out, take photos of like weird corners, like take a photo of a shed and go, what happens if this shed is my personal art studio? Or what would happen if a tree crashed through this shed and then I decided to live in it, and I like bring some blankets and I just like chill out in this shed. Like creating these little silly stories in your mind around mundane objects and then just run with it and go crazy. I think for me, that's how I design my dioramas, is just like creating weird little scenarios around small spaces that I see in the world.
Nice. Now I just think if I ever see you at a games event, I'll just see you looking at like a particular corner,
Yeah.
and I'll know that you're visualizing that corner. But what if
Yeah.
a rhino had stampeded through it and then it turned into a shrine to some forgotten religious age or something?
Yeah. I make everything into a shrine. That is another thing I do, is just people will come worship at this random thing. How do I make that look cute and exciting?
Looking forward to your new app, Shrinify or whatever. Yeah. Just turn whatever you want into a shrine. I've got another question for you, believe it or not, because that's the entire format of this event. This question is
Amazing.
from Rot Blush, who says, in your career, what was your breaking point to start working freelance in the games industry? And it's a good question as well, because there are so many conversations now that are about solving the job security problem,
Mhm, mhm,
and a lot of people going freelance as an
mhm.
alternative to kind of putting themselves into that very unsecure environment. So definitely a big topic at the moment. So love to hear your
Yeah.
take.
Yeah, absolutely. Like being a freelancer for me is kind of the way that I make myself feel secure. It maybe doesn't sound like the most secure thing to do, but being a freelancer, you can like run multiple jobs side by side if you manage to get multiple clients. So if you lose one, you still have an income stream. So yeah, I like being a freelancer. But yeah, so the question was uh, what kicked me off into being a freelancer, basically, right? What was the breakthrough point? So there wasn't, for me, I would say like a hard line breakthrough moment where I became a freelancer. It was kind of like a slow stepping up. So I had a job at Creative Assembly, and I was there for about 2 years, just shy of 2 years when I graduated university. And when I finished, well, after about, it was probably about a year and 10 months, I decided to take some time off work. So I blocked myself like a year in my calendar where I was just going to live at my mum's house and work on my portfolio, work on what I wanted to do. I was having a bit of like a crisis of what I wanted to do with my life and as an artist. Um, and so I like decided I was just going to take this year off. So during that time, I set myself up with some solo traveling. I went to places like Rome and Budapest and like tried to inspire myself. And I really got my head down with working on like personal projects. Again, dioramas, because that's what I do. Um, so I did like ones inspired by Rome, places that I'd seen, exactly what I said about, my inspiration and my process. And I like basically did these like concepts for dioramas, like one a week, and just made a bunch. Um, and during that time, I was contacted by Molasses Flood. So again, this is like I was contacted. I wasn't searching for work. So I was in like a very lucky position where I was contacted. But it could be that in my position, you could just be searching for jobs, searching for freelance gigs. There are lots of different places where people post work, um, or at the very baseline, just making projects and posting them online as if you are working for a client. Keep posting work. If you don't have a job right now, just keep posting work, good work. So yeah, I got this. Molasses Flood contacted me, and I worked for them for like I don't know, maybe like 5 months, 4 or 5 months, just making props specifically. But I was also like traveling and trying to take some time off. And that was my original plan. I wasn't planning to work and just got lucky there. But I ended up going back into an in-house job. And they wanted me to register myself as a company. And this is the point where they maybe slightly made a mistake because by me registering as a company, my brain just went into I'm independent now mode. So I worked as a contractor through my own limited company for Rare for like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And at that point, I was still posting a lot of work online, and I started getting freelance clients. So I worked for Rare and I was working for freelance clients. And at that point, that's when I started actually mentally classing myself as a freelancer. And I left Rare after going part-time. So I went part-time with Rare and part-time freelance. And then after 6 months, went full-time freelance. So it wasn't that I decided to quit my job and just take a punt as a freelancer. I was like threading two things together. It was really stressful. I was working like 7 days a week at one point, but it paid off. And yeah, I would say if you can like work a full time job or work on personal stuff and then also have like some sort of freelance job, that's a good way to like slowly move in that direction. But again, it was a weird times in the industry. It was COVID. Like it doesn't like a lot of stuff maybe doesn't necessarily apply now. So I can't give a definitive answer, I'm afraid.
Yeah, touch wood. We do not need to teach people how to work in another pandemic COVID
No,
environment, because
no,
it just
thank
won't
you.
happen again. It just won't happen again. Fingers crossed. But no, thanks for that. Thanks for that insight. And yeah, I think just that general idea of not just doing personal projects in your own time, but like if it starts to creep into a freelance space, like just have it as a sort of a slowly turning wheel that,
Yeah,
if it gains momentum, it gains momentum, and that's great,
yeah.
but there's no need to certainly jump vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, you
'Cause
totally could, but like it's obviously putting a lot of pressure on yourself. I think it's kind of a case of when you know, and
mm,
then you it feels like a natural stepping stone. At least that's in my experience and some friends' experiences. Is it like kind of comes when you know it, you know.
nice. Now we are just sort of a heads up for everyone. So we're sort of reaching. It's not quite 2 o'clock. It's 10 minutes to 2 o'clock. And these events always are about an hour-ish. So we're going to sort of start to, I think, maybe speed through these last few questions where we can, especially
Shorter
because
answers.
it's shorter answers. But Anya, I know for a fact that you're ready to give a lengthy technical answer to any technical questions. And the next two questions are technical.
Okay.
So what I'll do is, if I present you with these two questions together, they're quite different, but you might sort of want to bridge them together a little bit because the technical stuff. So the
Yeah.
first question that I can see is technical is from Ocean the Bard, which says, "Have you seen
Daniel,
a
hello.
shift?" That you know them. Have
Yes.
you seen a shift in environment workflow since Nanite became a thing? Is Topo and tech still as important now?
Mhm.
And then the question I can see not far below that is back from Thomas Wanless, who says, "How much do you delve into the technical art side of environment art with shaders and coding, etc.?" So I know you've told me a little bit that you're technical, but what's your relationship with the tech? And then what's your thought on Ocean the Bard's question, Nanite, Topo, tech, etc.?
Yeah, 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 so they're quite, like, different questions, but I'll jump into the second one first, which is, like, technical wise, I'm not very technical now. I used to be more technical. I mean, I'll make my own shaders, and I used to experiment more with blueprints in Unreal Engine, so I definitely can't code, like, I can make some blueprints in Unreal Engine, to, like, make things move a little bit, but it's been a long time. But I will say that I think it's very important to try and do some of the technical stuff. Making shaders is essential, I would say, as an environment artist. If you want to just really quickly make your own water shader to stick on something or a glass shader, certainly in an indie game studio, if you can make your own stuff, you're kind of saving your poor technical tech artist's life who is like struggling to do a billion things at once. And often I'll make a shader. I'll say how I want it to be and how I want it to look, and then a tech artist will remake it properly, make it better and actually optimized for the game. So technical wise, I'm not super technical. However, I would like to be more technical, and I'm actually looking into tech art courses for myself at the moment. So it's good to like to be a generalist. If I would say personally, generalizing a little bit, it does work in your favor. To answer the nanite question, every studio that I've worked with recently is using Unreal Engine 5. So I think everybody needs to be using Unreal Engine 5 for personal projects. Unreal Engine 4, everybody's transitioned away from it. Um, Nanite wise, uh, again, everybody is using Nanite. However, this is very personal opinion. How useful Nanite is a different matter entirely. Um, so I'm seeing most studios, and for my personal projects as well, I'm probably adding like 20% of try count to a mesh. Um, it's not like the one size fits all solution that they've advertised, which is like you sculpt something and then like vertex paint it and then it just works. TM, like it's not right now anyway. We're still at this weird transition phase into like next gen. So I still encourage people to work the old fashioned way, which is still the current way, with like low poly, high poly, you bake it out, um, using tilables, using modular kits. Um, I think it's essential to know for like games that you're making in an indie sense anyway, because like a lot of indie small games, things that are going on Switch, they still need to be optimized. Like, you can't just put a billion polys on a switch and expect it to work. So yes, there has been something of a transition with the advent of nanite, in terms of we are using it in a lot of games, but we're still working like the old-fashioned way with like poly counts, or like maybe slightly higher poly counts. That's just my experience. I haven't worked on like a billion games using nanite and Unreal. Like, I do a lot of concept art stuff as well. So, but yeah, that's my experiences. Yes, nanite is in use. It's not having a huge effect on how we make assets right now.
Nice. Thank you very much for answering those. And now I have to do a little bit of my job, which is, did you know that there's a technical arts course coming up with Intergames sprints?
Is
So
there now?
Anya,
Sign me up. I'm
just
gonna have a
saying,
look.
do check it out. But no, we're not gonna cross promote another course. You've got a course, and we're gonna talk about you and your knowledge. But no, you mentioned it, and yeah, maybe something fortuitous there. But we can save that conversation for another time, because I've got another question for you from Maria. Maria has asked, yeah, you've mentioned working really hard. You've mentioned working 7-day
Yeah.
weeks. You've really mentioned that, there's been a lot of you pushing personal projects, and it sounds like you've never had a break, really. So just in all of those 10 years, burnout is a common it's a common topic that we're
Mm.
talking about in the games industry, especially as we're more aware of our mental health and safeties and things like that. What's your relationship with burnout been like? If you're happy to talk on that subject, by the way, you're
Yeah,
absolutely
of
welcome
course.
to opt out.
It's fine.
Yeah, in that case, please, by all means.
Yeah, like, I'm like, I do not hold back when it comes to talking about burnout, because I think it's a huge thing. It's like, like, absolutely will say I've experienced burnout. I would go so far as to say that I am in a perpetual state of almost burnout sometimes. I think if you are a creative type and you are working in an industry where you are using your creative skills, there's always this fine line that you're tracing, where you're making stuff that you're passionate about, but there's also this pressure to earn from it. Uh, if anyone is anything like me, there's like a million different ways that my mind will go. Like, I can do more concept art. Oh, I'm not doing any personal work. Oh, I'll work on a concept art piece, and then I'll be like, oh, but I should be doing a 3D piece. I should be learning technical art. Like, there's so many different things, and it's completely overwhelming. And it can be just a mental barrage that is hard to get away from sometimes. Um, in terms of dealing with this burnout, it's very, very difficult. It's difficult to keep it at bay. It's difficult when you're in it. It's difficult to see sometimes when you're in it, when you're burnt out already. Which is why I kind of say, like, I'm in this perpetual state of burnout sometimes, because I'll look back at myself like 2 months ago and I'll be like, yeah, I mean, I was really struggling back then and I didn't know it at the time. But now looking back, I realize I was having a super hard time. So again, I think if you ask any artist this, they'll probably say a similar thing, but I would always say just go easy on yourself. Um, if you have work, like, don't feel under pressure to constantly make personal art. If you're tired, like, if you get home from work and you're tired, you're tired. Like, it's fine. Just take it easy. If you're struggling to get into the industry and you're trying to make work, I think speaking with other people can kind of bring you out of this like stuck in mindset. Um, I'm certainly always happy to chat with people if you just want to like get things off your chest or like talk about art. I definitely find if I'm burning out with work, I burn out hardest when I realize I haven't been speaking to anybody for a while. Like, I work freelance, I work from often from my camper van, or I'm just like locked in a room working. I don't join a lot of meetings. The second I join a meeting and I chat with people, I feel much better. I feel like a lot has been taken off of me. Having friends that you can speak to about things. But yeah, taking breaks, just don't get too stressed about like making art all the time. I started a personal project in 2021 which I'm going to be talking about for this course. Started it in 2021. It's still not finished. I'm going to be working on it while we do this course, like retopping things. I sculpted the whole thing, and then I just walked away like 2 years ago. So and I'm like, it's okay. That's fine. If I don't want to work on the project, I don't want to work on the project because I was burnt out, and I get burnt out really easily. So yeah, just try to recognize when you're burning out really hard, and then just kind of try and be nice to yourself a little bit. But it's hard. It's very, very hard, and it's a very big topic. I could talk about it all day.
Yeah, we'll book you in. We'll book you in for several more conversations, as it sounds like we can expand on several different things, and they can be their own talks. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going through some of the questions here, and there's one question that I think is very different to all the other questions. I think it's quite interesting as well. So I'm going to zoom in on this one, and I think that might just take us up to time, and we'll leave. We'll sort of finish off with some finishing remarks and bits of advice and anything else that you just want to drizzle over this meal of a Q&A session. So this question is from Imperial Capital. It says, how can a small new developer make an attractive commission offer to an established artist? But I suppose really there's something in there about like what makes a project exciting for you to work on if it's not the big dollar numbers, because there must be something in there, like it must speak to you, or it must, they're going to let you do foliage or something. So sort of that question, but also a little bit about, what makes an exciting project?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. Like when I first started reading it, I was like, what? What am I reading? I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Yes. Excellent question. So this, I think, is very much dependent on the artists that you're approaching. Some artists, they're kind to themselves and they only take on like limited amounts of work. So they might just have a full-time job and then they have their life and they're busy and, that's fine. There are other artists who they might not be very active online, and so it's hard to even find them in the first place, but maybe they have like mental space and capacity to be interested in other people's projects. I have worked on a few little indie projects in the past, and it's definitely a case for me, and this is why it kind of depends on the artist, I think. I am taking a lower commission if I'm working on a small indie developer's project. Obviously, like it's budgeting. So I do definitely have to be interested in the project. I think with a lot of artists that are already working in the industry, you're going to find that they're not going to be able to offer you like a full-time stuff. Like it might be a couple of hours a week or a couple of hours a day, or like checking it if you've got like a Discord going, checking in on the Discord and giving feedback to artists or whatever. Like for me, I tend to join indie projects as like more kind of offering art direction and stuff like that rather than actually making assets. So maybe that is my suggestion. Like if you want to bring on an established artist, it would usually be in a more like senior capacity, shorter periods of time. Maybe like a set call once a week where you like pay for like an hourly rate or whatever. You have a call, or you bring in like more junior artists that can work full time on the project, and then you're seeking guidance from a more established artist. Or maybe you bring in an established artist to provide a series of overpaints. Maybe they're giving like a talk to your artists about like more the technical side of stuff, or so I hope that makes sense, but maybe like smaller amounts of their time, but maybe more meaningful use of their time, rather than paying someone for like 3 days a week and then suddenly half of your artist budget is eaten or whatever. But yeah, there's also just artists out there that are willing to help. I've been trying to dial it down a bit recently, like where I've been working with a couple of like more indie clients for like shorter periods of time. And I tend to do this personally. I'll have like a couple for a few months and then I'll drop it down and focus on personal stuff. And then I'll bring it back up where I have a couple of indie clients. So it might just be timing. If you approach someone at the right time, they might be available. There's a lot of variables. But yeah, I think just keeping a list of people and approaching them and seeing if there's any availability there.
Nice. Thanks for expanding on that. And yeah, sort of, as I say, I thought it was a very different question and really
Yeah.
lovely to sort of, yeah, hear it. And again, the answer is very sort of heavily leaning in that. A lot of variables, depends, a lot of different moving parts.
Yeah.
Um, isn't that just the way it goes? Um, well, thank you. Thank you very much for the question, Imperial Capital. And thank you everyone for all of your questions. Thank you everyone for all of your engagement and your sort of your chat and just being really engaged with this event. Thanks for being curious. You know, it's that curiosity that I think is going to really serve you well in whatever it is you want to go on to do in the future. I'm going to start to wrap up this particular Q&A event today, just so we've sort of hit our hour, and means that we can go and enjoy our offline lives before we jump onto the next online event. But before we let you go, Anya, is there anything that sort of no specific subjects now, just is there anything that you'd like to talk about or mention? Is there anything that you want to share, a sort of a defining piece of advice for people, maybe? Just, you know, the floor's all yours, basically.
No pressure then. Um, I think honestly, the biggest thing I can say is like, as I said at the start of this call, the fact that you are here to join events like this says a lot about your interest in developing as artists. So yeah, big thumbs up. Like it is hard to make the time to, at least for me, maybe I'm crazy, but to set a time in my day and show up to an event to for an hour, I find that very difficult myself. And so you're already steps ahead in terms of like your interest. So if you can just take that and apply it to making art, asking questions, sort of being in touch with people on things like Discord. I am trying to join the Discord server, but I'm having some technical issues. But I will be on the Discord server to like try and answer questions where I can. So feel free once I'm in there to at me. You know, seeking out portfolio reviews and so on. That is probably the biggest bit of like, I don't know, advice, thumbs up, whatever I can give is just it is hard. You may find that you get burnt out sometimes, but the fact that you're putting yourself forwards and you're trying to do things like this says a lot about your attitude and where that will take you. Is just it can be difficult. I was working 7 days a week for a while. That was burnout territory. But you know, sometimes, you know, just yeah, don't do that. But just if you are going to work really hard, remember to give yourself breaks and just for goodness sake, don't burn yourself out. It's horrible.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks for sort of speaking very honestly from that experience, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are towing that line, and we're
Yeah.
here to say, stop it, take a
Yeah,
step
don't.
back, go watch a movie at the cinema or something. What, you know, whatever helps you de-stress. Yeah, so thank you, just once again, thank you, Anya, for coming onto the channel. Thanks for sitting here with me for an hour and just being an open book, really, to all these many questions. And to the audiences, you know, I hope there's been something here that you found valuable, but just in case you need to hear it one last time, if you found that there's more you'd like to know or something that wasn't answered here, you know, you're still hungry for knowledge and to develop, there are lots of different ways that you can kind of progress from this point onwards. One is, please do join the Intergames Discord. It's a very alive community of people giving each other advice. There is a channel specifically for getting feedback on your work called the Feedback Forum. There's works in progress. There's people sharing stuff that they've been doing in game jams. There's people just chatting specifically about art. You can find out about all the events we're doing there. And if you're interested in upping your art portfolio, we've just recently done sort of an art portfolio event, actually, not too long ago. If you look at the Intergames YouTube and you look at our recent live streams and scroll up, you'll be able to see that we've done some art portfolio reviews not too long ago. So check it all out, basically, and trust us in that there will be more. It's literally my job to do more of this stuff. So you know, if it doesn't happen, it means I've mysteriously gone missing. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all of your support thus far. I think that about does it, really. A haughty wave to the audience, sort of a big wave goodbye now, as I'm going to play a little looping video. It's got a QR code, by the way, to our link tree. So if you've not been able to click on any links, get your cameras out if you're watching this on a device other than your smartphone, and follow all the good stuff. Thanks for joining us, everyone. One last time, I've been Jonas, and my guest has been. Am I pointing in the right way? Anya. And we've been into games. See you around.